Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthington left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes,
Do you mean to say you had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I was offering a huge reward for that.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be unusually hard up.
There's no good offering a reward that the thing is found now.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that this thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen it with me 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read whatever's inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to do to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, is it absurd to leave a hard and fast rule what one should read and what one shouldn't? More than half of the modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
Listen, I'm quite aware of the fact. And I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Charming old lady she is, too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cicely with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That doesn't matter, that surely is up to my aunt to decide whether she's tall or not. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does she call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter her size, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I've ever saw in my life. It is practically absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthington, B4, The Albany. I'll keep this card as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwen Olden, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had better much have that thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you were kind enough to inform me why you were Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a boy, made me his guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle for reasons probably beyond your understanding, and could appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of the admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That's nothing to you, my dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. And when one is placed in position of guardian, one has to adopt very high morals, a moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I've always pretended to be Ernest. And I created that younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany, and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole pure truth.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be a bad thing at all.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You were one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What do you mean, what's Bunburyist?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you'd like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinarily bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Will's tonight, for I have been really engaged in Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me at all.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending invitations. It was very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You have much better time with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all, or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will be placed next to me. To the right. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I will tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cicely's a little too much interested in him, you know? It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same thing with your, invalid friend of yours with absurd name.
Nothing will induce me more to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear, very, very young friend, is a theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wangarian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis?
I suppose so.
Yes,
You want to.
but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Enter Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.